I work at the local library. There are strange rules to follow. I needed this job. That was the thought running through my head as I stepped into Willow Creek Public Library. The unemployment checks weren't enough anymore, and the bills kept piling up. After losing my office job last month, I had applied anywhere and everywhere. When Summit Staffing Solutions offered me a position at the library, I didn't even bother asking for details. The building sat on the outskirts of downtown, its red brick exterior and towering windows giving it an old-fashioned charm. It wasn't much, but at least it wasn't retail. I had dealt with more than enough irate customers in my previous job to last me a lifetime. Mr. Harris was waiting for me at the front desk, punctual to the minute. He had the kind of exhausted look that never faded, like he hadn't had a full night's sleep in years. His sweater vest was rumpled, his glasses slightly smudged, and his expression made it clear that he had better places to be. Emily Carter. He barely gave me time to nod. Follow me. The library was more spacious than it seemed from outside. We walked through endless rows of shelves, our footsteps echoing in the still morning air. A few early visitors were already settled at the study tables. Harris led me to a small office tucked away in the back. The desk was cluttered with stacks of paper, and an ancient computer hummed softly in the corner. He rifled through a drawer and retrieved a keyring along with a single sheet of paper. "These are your rules," he said, sliding the paper toward me. "Stick to them exactly." My name is Jake, and I oversee a small resort nestled on the edge of nowhere. That's not just an expression. There isn't a major city for miles, and you won't spot this place on any tourist brochures. Hidden away, it's surrounded by rugged cliffs and dense woodlands, with the vast Atlantic stretching endlessly beyond. You might assume running such a secluded retreat would be isolating, but I've never felt that way. This resort has been my entire world for as long as I can remember. I was raised here. My grandfather, Walter, ran the place before me. He hailed from deep in the Appalachian backcountry, where the forests are thick, the accents are thicker, and superstition isn't just a belief, it's a way of life. I never knew my parents. Grandpa told me they left when I was just an infant, and that was the end of it. He raised me within these aging walls, where the hallways groaned with every gust of wind and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks was a constant companion. Walter wasn't what you'd call affectionate. He was strict, a man of few words, but every word carried weight. He ruled the resort with an unwavering sense of control, and the guests respected him for it. He had this ability to make people feel protected, as if nothing bad could touch them here, so long as they followed his rules. I think that's why guests kept returning. That, and the stories. Places like this always have them, whispers, rumors, legends that send shivers down your spine. People talk about how staying here changes lives overnight. Some leave with unexpected fortune, promotions, financial windfalls, or finding their true love. Others aren't so lucky. They disappear for days, only to reappear dazed and disoriented, or they leave and misfortune follows. It's all part of the mystery. As a child, I believed every tale. How could I not? Grandpa would sit me by the fireplace, his voice low and steady, spinning stories about those who ignored the rules and faced the consequences. His words carried the weight of secrets not meant for the world to know. He always ended with the same warning: "This land doesn't belong to us, Jake. We're just borrowing it." At first, I didn't grasp the meaning. But as I grew older, I started noticing things. Strange things. And I learned to respect this place the way he did. When Walter passed, the resort became mine. At first, it was overwhelming, keeping the finances in order, managing staff, ensuring the guests were satisfied. But the most difficult part wasn't the work, it was filling Walter's shoes. He commanded respect effortlessly. I wasn't like that. I was quieter, more introspective. But over time, I discovered my own way of keeping the resort's peculiar spirit alive while ensuring everyone stayed safe. The stories about this place still attract visitors. Some are skeptics, chasing a cheap thrill or a spooky anecdote. Others arrive desperate for a change, clinging to the hope that the legends hold some truth. I don't make promises. I simply run the place, hand out the brochures, and make sure every guest understands the rules. The rules are simple: respect the land, don't take what isn't yours, and avoid the areas marked off limits. Most guests chuckle when they read them, but I have stories to justify each one. That brings me to last spring. A group of college students arrived, loud and brash, fresh off a long road trip and eager to cause trouble. There were 5 of them, 3 guys and 2 girls, openly scoffing at the idea that this place was anything more than a spooky gimmick. One of the guys, clearly the leader, swaggered up to the counter, wearing a smirk that spelled trouble. "So, this the famous haunted resort?" he asked, leaning against the desk. "It's not haunted," I replied evenly. "But it is old." Sure, he said dismissively. "We're here for the full experience, ghosts, curses, all of it. Bring it on." I slid a brochure across the counter. "Rules are on the last page. Make sure you all read them." He barely glanced at it before smirking. "Rules, huh? And what happens if we break 'em? A ghost gonna come after us?" I didn't return his grin. "You'll regret it." That made him pause. He studied me, unsure if I was joking, then shrugged, stuffed the brochure in his pocket, and turned back to his friends. They were already heading out the door, laughing and hollering like they owned the place. I watched them go, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. But I'd done my part. The choice was theirs now. The rules aren't complicated. They're simple, straightforward, and clearly stated in the brochure. But people like them never take them seriously. I can't force anyone to listen, and I've stopped trying to convince them. Instead, I keep my warnings brief and let the land handle the rest. The first rule is the most crucial: don't tamper with the trees marked with red tape. Don't cut them, don't snap off branches, and don't even trample the undergrowth around them. The red tape is there for a reason, and it's not decoration. Those trees predate the resort. Maybe even this land's earliest history. My grandpa always said the trees were sacred, though that word never quite sat right with me. Sacred things bring serenity. These trees? They command reverence. As a child, I believed every word Grandpa spoke about them. He described them as if they possessed a life force we couldn't fully comprehend. He used to say the oldest trees, the ones with trunks so massive that 5 grown men linking arms couldn't encircle them, were home to giants. Not just any giants, though, giants with hands as red as a laborer's, stained by years of toil under the scorching sun. Grandpa claimed they lived high in the trees, where the gnarled branches clawed at the sky like ancient fingers. He said if you stood too close, you could catch the scent of their cigars. That smell is one of my earliest memories of the resort. It doesn't linger all the time, just every so often, a fleeting trace of ash and smoke that makes you wonder if it's real or just your mind playing tricks on you. But when I caught a whiff as a child, I'd always eye the nearest tree wrapped in red tape and give it a wide berth. Grandpa taught me that you don't meddle with the trees, and you certainly don't interfere with whatever resides in them. He had a story for everything, but the giants were the ones he spoke of most. If you wanted to cut down one of their trees, you had to ask first. And you couldn't just think it, you had to say it aloud, clear as day, so they could hear you. If you wanted to rest beneath one, the same rule applied. You asked permission before sitting down, and when you got up to leave, you said thank you. Every time. It wasn't about superstition, he insisted. It was about recognizing that the land isn't yours. You're merely borrowing it, passing through. The moment you forget that, you invite trouble. Through the years, I've seen what happens to those who forget. Maybe the giants are just myths. Maybe they aren't. But whatever ties itself to those trees has its own way of enforcing the rules. One summer, a couple stayed at the resort. They were quiet, polite, and didn't stir up any problems, at first. The man, Doug, was one of those nature-loving types. He spent his days trekking the trails while his wife relaxed by the pool. One afternoon, I saw him return with a bundle of branches tucked under his arm. He'd snapped them off a tree marked with red tape, claiming he wanted to carve something. I calmly explained his mistake, shared a few of Grandpa's stories, hoping to spook him into returning the wood and making amends. He laughed it off, said he didn't believe in fairy tales and refused to put them back. The following day, he went for a swim in the ocean. The water was calm, yet somehow, he got caught in a riptide and nearly drowned. When we pulled him out, he was breathless, his face ghostly pale. He was fortunate to survive, but he left the resort that evening without so much as a proper checkout. His wife later told me he spent the entire drive home muttering about something he saw. Then there was a group of hikers. One of them, Travis, had a rebellious streak. He saw the red tape as an invitation to test his luck. On his last day, he climbed one of the forbidden trees. He made it halfway up before a branch snapped beneath him. The fall shattered his arm in 3 places, requiring an emergency airlift. I don't know what frightened him more, the agony or the way he looked at me when I checked on him. It was like he realized, too late, that he'd crossed a line. Like he was bracing for something even worse. These aren't the kinds of tales I tell guests when they check in. Most wouldn't believe them anyway. But I've seen enough to know better. I don't need proof that the giants are real. What matters is the pattern, the way misfortune shadows those who break the rules. And it always starts with the trees. Even now, as I walk the property, keeping an eye on things, I take note of the red tape. It's fraying in places, faded in others, but still marking the boundaries of something I don't fully understand. When I catch the faint scent of ash in the air, I nod toward the nearest tree and keep moving. There's one rule that's not in the brochure. It's not meant for the guests, it's just for me. It's something Grandpa did every day, and now it's become my own ritual. I don't know if it truly makes a difference, but it feels right. Maybe it's just a habit, or maybe it's something more. Either way, I do it every morning. Out behind my apartment, separate from the main resort property, there's a tree. It's unmarked by red tape, but it carries an importance I can't ignore. It stands tall and ancient, its thick branches extending outward like open arms. At its base rests my grandfather's grave. A simple marker bears his name and the years of his life. I've never considered relocating it to a traditional cemetery. Each morning, without fail, I make my way to that tree. It doesn't matter if the sky is pouring rain, blanketed in snow, or bathed in golden sunlight, I always make the walk. I bring 2 items with me, a red mug brimming with coffee and a small white bowl filled with sugar. The mug must always be red, that's part of the tradition. I don't know why, but Grandpa always used a red mug, and I have no intention of changing it now. The sugar sits in an unembellished, white bowl, plain yet purposeful. I place both offerings at the foot of the tree, right beside Grandpa's resting place. Then, I lower myself to the ground, crossing my legs, and take a moment to reflect. Sometimes I whisper a prayer, though I've never been particularly religious. More often than not, I simply let my thoughts drift. The solitude here is different from the resort's ambience, deeper, more profound. The only sounds are the calls of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. The coffee and sugar are not for me. They are an offering. Grandpa used to say that this land isn't only home to people and trees. Other things reside here as well, spirits, shadows, and whispering folk. He used to weave stories about them when I was young, sitting by the fire with a steaming cup of tea cradled in his hands. He always insisted they weren't malicious, merely playful tricksters. They delighted in moving objects, causing mischief, and making people question their own sanity. But if treated with respect, they could be invaluable allies. They bring fortune, Grandpa would say. If you're lucky enough to befriend one, you'll never know hardship. Leaving coffee and sugar is my way of staying in their good graces. Grandpa claimed they had a taste for sweetness and bold flavors, so he made sure to leave the same offerings each morning. He was certain it worked, that they safeguarded the resort, ensured its smooth operation, and even helped bring in guests. I don't know if I believe it, but one thing is undeniable: every single morning, the mug is drained, and the sugar has vanished without a trace. There are no spills, no scattered grains of sugar. Just an empty mug and a clean bowl. At first, I assumed animals, raccoons, squirrels, something like that, were the culprits. But I've never seen so much as a paw print near the tree. It's always pristine, as if whatever takes the offering is careful to leave no evidence behind. Every morning, I refill the mug in the bowl without fail. It's become as instinctual as brushing my teeth or making breakfast. After setting them down, I settle in and retrieve my pocket knife, a gift from Grandpa when I turned 10. Its wooden handle has been worn smooth from years of use, familiar in my grip. I use it to carve small figures from bits of wood, a bird, a flower, or sometimes just intricate patterns. The rhythmic motion of the blade soothes me, giving me space to think. Running the resort is no simple task, and these quiet moments keep me grounded. Whether the ritual brings me fortune or not, I can't say. I've never stumbled upon unexpected wealth or life-altering luck. But I've also never been sick. Not once. I've never caught so much as a cold, never broken a bone, never spent a night in a hospital. Maybe I just have a strong immune system. Or maybe there's truth in Grandpa's tales. One thing I've never done is ask for answers. Grandpa always said the beings of the land hear every word spoken near their trees. If you have a question, you can pose it alongside your offering. If they take a liking to you, they might even answer. He said the trick was to be clear and direct. They dislike riddles, even if they enjoy their own brand of trickery. I've considered it before. There are plenty of things I'd like to know. Why my parents left. Whether I'm doing a good enough job running the resort. If the stories Grandpa told me are truly real. But I've never felt the need to ask. Maybe it's because I'm content with my life. Or maybe it's because I don't want to upset the balance. The offering feels like a token of gratitude, a sign of acknowledgement. Asking for something in return feels wrong. It feels like tempting fate. So, I adhere to the routine: coffee in a red mug, sugar in a small bowl, and a few moments of silence beneath the tree. It's a simple ritual, yet it keeps me tethered to Grandpa, to this land, to whatever unseen force keeps this place alive. And as long as the mug is always empty and the sugar always vanishes, I won't question it. This morning was no exception. I poured the coffee, measured out the sugar, and carried them to the tree. The air was crisp, the ground still damp from last night's rain. I placed the offerings down, settled against the trunk, and let my thoughts drift. The resort is bustling this week, college students on break, a few families escaping for a getaway. My to-do list is endless: paperwork, maintenance inspections, ensuring the kitchen crew is prepped for the evening rush. But for now, I just sit, absorbing the quiet as the world stirs awake around me. When my time is up, I rise, stretch, and collect the empty mug and bowl from the previous day. They're always waiting for me exactly as I left them, clean, untouched, prepared for the next offering. As I walk back toward my apartment to start the day, I glance over my shoulder at the tree. Thanks, I murmur, more out of habit than expectation. I never anticipate an answer. I never receive one. The next rule is different. It's not something I can fully explain, and I doubt I'll ever completely understand it. But it's straightforward: always acknowledge the lady in the red coat. She is as much a part of this place as the cliffs, the trees, or the crash of the Atlantic waves at night. No one knows her name or her origins. She just appears, sometimes, in the elevator leading to the underground lot. The lot itself is enormous, far larger than necessary for a resort this size. It sprawls beneath the property like a maze, its flickering lights and endless corridors creating an eerie atmosphere. It's not a place where people linger, and I don't blame them. The lady in the red coat isn't a daily occurrence. She's unpredictable. She might be in the elevator when you step in, or she may enter as it descends. She always looks the same: a striking red coat that falls just below her knees, her bare feet damp, leaving faint wet footprints on the floor. And she always knows your name. That's the part that unsettles people most. Most freeze when it happens, but the rule is clear: you must respond. Be courteous. Greet her with a simple hello or good evening. Then, when the elevator doors open, find your car and leave. Don't ask who she is. Don't acknowledge how strange it is that she knows your name. And above all, do not be rude. Most guests follow this rule. Those who don't, well, that's when things get complicated. If you ignore her, refuse to respond, or act aggressively, the parking lot transforms. The exit vanishes. The elevator doors disappear. You're left wandering through a seemingly infinite maze of parked cars, searching for an escape that isn't there. It's always the same story. Someone returns to the lobby, shaken and exhausted, claiming they've been lost down there for days. Their clothes are rumpled, and they clutch their shoes like they've been running. They always start with the same question: why didn't you warn me about the lot? I do warn them. It's all in the brochure, written clearly on the last page. I even mention it when guests check in. But the kind of person who disregards the lady in the red coat is the kind who ignores rules in general. There is, however, a way out if you get trapped. It's strange, but it works. If you turn all your clothing inside out, your shirt, pants, jacket, whatever you have on, then walk around the nearest bend, the exit should reappear. So will the elevator doors. I can't explain why this works, but it does. Seeing guests return from such an ordeal is never pleasant. They're always shaken, sweating, firing off frantic questions. Some swear they were in the lot for days, even though only a few minutes have passed up here. Others refuse to speak about what they saw. They just grab their belongings and leave in a hurry, often cutting their stay short. I can't say for certain what, or who, the lady in the red coat is. She's not a guest, that much is clear. No staff member has ever encountered her outside the elevator. And, strangest of all, she never appears on the security footage. It's as if she only exists within that space, gliding between the lobby and the depths of the lot. There's a tale that lingers, a legend about a woman in red who perished in the part of the Atlantic where Blackwood Resort now stands. It's an old story, handed down by the locals who lived in the area long before the resort was built. They say she was a fisherwoman, working alone on a modest boat. One fateful day, a storm arrived without warning, overturning her vessel and pulling her beneath the waves. Her body was never recovered, but her crimson coat washed ashore, tattered and drenched. Some believe she's still out there, searching for her lost boat. I'm not sure if she and the woman in the elevator are connected, or if it's merely a coincidence. But this is the kind of place where coincidences rarely feel like accidents. Grandpa always said that every piece of this land carries a story, even if we don't fully understand it. The last time someone disregarded the rule, it was a businessman in a rush. Pleasant enough, but always preoccupied, constantly on the phone, treating the staff like they were obstacles. When I handed him the brochure, he barely skimmed it. That evening, as I wrapped up paperwork in the lobby, he burst through the front doors. His tie was loose, his shirt disheveled, and he looked absolutely livid. "What kind of place are you running here?" he demanded, his voice bouncing off the empty lobby walls. I asked him what happened. He claimed he had been trapped in the underground lot for an entire week. He insisted that the elevator doors had vanished, and each time he thought he found the exit, it led to yet another dead end. His phone was useless, and only after finally flipping his clothes inside out, just as the back of the brochure suggested, was he able to find his way out. Took him long enough. I asked if he encountered the lady in the red coat. His face turned ashen, and he nodded. "She said my name," he murmured. "I never told her my name." "Did you greet her?" I asked. He didn't answer. That told me everything I needed to know. I reminded him of the rules. He didn't respond. The next morning, he checked out without a word. Violence is rare here. Unease, mystery, and eerie encounters? That's to be expected. But physical harm? That's something else entirely. And yet, when it happens, it always traces back to one rule. Perhaps the most important one: never take anything that doesn't belong to you. This land isn't ours. It never was. We are merely guests, borrowing what already existed long before us. The sand, the stones, the driftwood, even the smallest shells belong to something much older. If you take something, you must offer something in return. That's the way it has always been. And when people forget, the consequences are never mild. I was in my office, reviewing invoices, when the lobby doors crashed open. The sudden noise startled me, and I looked up to see the spring breakers from earlier. Only now, they weren't joking or laughing. They were frantic, faces drained of color, their clothes soaked with seawater, smeared with wet sand. "He's missing a finger," one of them shrieked. I kept my voice even. "What happened?" They all started talking at once, shouting about their friend, the beach, the blood on his hand. I raised a hand to silence them and turned to their leader. He was pale, drenched in sweat, clutching his hand to his chest. A strip of torn fabric was wrapped around the stump where a finger used to be. "What happened?" I asked again, my voice firm. Do you like the story? Don't forget to subscribe to get more content like this. "It bit me," he gasped, trembling. "Something in the water, it grabbed me and took my finger." I didn't need to ask what it was. I'd heard this story before. I've seen this kind of terror before. Devil's Hollow is home to what my grandfather referred to as merfolk, but not the kind you'd see in fairy tales. They aren't enchanting. They don't lounge on rocks singing siren songs. If anything, they are the opposite. Their voices, however, are haunting. They draw you in before you even realize what's happening. But they are territorial, possessive, and envious, with little patience for humans who overstep their boundaries. Grandpa told me they've been here for longer than memory can reach, residing in the depths, nesting in the caves revealed at low tide. They do not tolerate intruders, and they especially do not forgive thieves. It doesn't matter if you're unaware of the rules. To them, taking from their domain is the highest offense. And they retaliate in kind. Over the years, I've witnessed enough to believe. Those who trespass in Devil's Hollow always pay a price, whether they recognize it or not. Sometimes, it's something minor, a lost wallet, a broken phone. Other times, the cost is far greater. Much, much worse. "What did you take?" I asked, my tone sharp. He froze, his wide eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. His friends exchanged nervous glances, confusion and fear written on their faces. "I didn't," he started, but I cut him off. "What did you take?" I repeated, my voice steady and cold. One of the girls, maybe his girlfriend, spoke up hesitantly. He picked up a shell," she admitted. "A big one, from one of the caves at Devil's Hollow. He said he wanted to keep it for me." I inhaled deeply, my jaw tightening. Devil's Hollow. Of course. A stunning spot near the shore, dotted with limestone caves that reveal themselves when the tide retreats. But it's also one of the most dangerous places to ignore the rules. "Where's the shell now?" I asked. The girl hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled it out. It was a striking shell, pink and white, its intricate ridges shimmering under the light. It would have made a perfect keepsake if it didn't carry a cost. "Give it to me," I said, extending my hand. She placed it in my palm, her fingers trembling. I turned to one of the staff members who had arrived at the sound of the commotion. "Call an ambulance," I instructed. "They need medical attention." The staff member nodded and guided the shaken group toward the lounge, where they could wait for paramedics. The leader was still clutching his injured hand, his face twisted in pain, but his friends supported him as they moved away. For a moment, I stood there, the shell weighty in my grip. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. When they get violent, they're not just angry. They're furious. And they won't stop until balance is restored. I had to make things right. Grabbing a beach closed sign from storage, I headed toward Devil's Hollow. The air was still, the waves gently caressing the shore. The tide was low, revealing the limestone caves, their dark mouths gaping like silent sentinels. I made my way to the largest cave, the one I knew the spring breakers must have entered. The sand beneath my feet was cool as I knelt at the entrance. I'm not particularly religious, but in times like this, it feels right to place my faith somewhere. I made the sign of the cross, just like Grandpa used to, and bowed my head. "I'm sorry," I murmured, my voice low yet firm. "This land isn't ours. It belongs to you, and we are only passing through. I'm here to return what was taken." I set the shell down on the sand before me, its smooth surface gleaming in the dim cave light. The air seemed heavier, charged with an unseen energy. "Please," I continued, "spare the boy. People today have forgotten the old ways. They don't understand. I'm here to ask for your forgiveness." The water inside the cave rippled, small waves stirring at the edges. The ripples grew, their motion intensifying, until the water darkened into a deep, unsettling red. I held my breath, watching as the color spread outward, staining the sand where water met land. Then, as suddenly as it started, the water stilled. The red vanished, the ripples smoothed out, and silence returned. But I knew better than to think it was over. Returning the shell was only the beginning. The ritual wasn't complete. Grandpa had been clear: when the merfolk were angered enough to lash out, an apology alone wouldn't suffice. I left the shell in the cave and walked back toward the resort. On the way, I retrieved another sign from storage and returned to the beach. Hammering it into the sand at the path's entrance, I made sure the message was clear: beach closed. No entry. For 3 days, I kept everyone away from the shore. I didn't offer explanations, and most people didn't ask. The spring breakers were too shaken to argue, and the other guests respected the warning. That time was crucial. I needed to make amends. Grandpa had taught me how to appease the merfolk when their rage reached a breaking point. It wasn't just about giving back what was stolen. That was only the first step. To fully restore the balance, I had to offer 3 things: something sweet, something ancient, and something deeply personal. Only then would their fury subside. The first day, I brought a bowl of honey to the cave. I poured it onto the sand where the water met the shore, watching as the golden liquid shimmered in the dim light. It felt odd, leaving such a simple thing as an offering, but Grandpa always insisted they craved sweetness. The honey seeped into the sand, and the waves remained undisturbed. On the second day, I searched the resort storage room and found an old silver bracelet that had belonged to my grandmother. It was aged and tarnished, yet still held an elegant beauty, adorned with an intricate floral pattern etched along the band. Parting with it wasn't easy, but Grandpa's teachings were clear: something old had to carry significance. I placed it in the same spot where I had left the honey, watching as the tide gently lapped around the edges of the cave. The third and final offering was the hardest: something personal. I pondered what that could mean, what I possessed that truly carried weight. In the end, I chose the pocket knife my grandpa had given me when I was 10. It wasn't extravagant, just a modest blade with a wooden handle smoothed by years of use. But it meant everything to me. I had carried it every day since he passed, the one object that made me feel connected to him. I knelt on the sand, gripping the knife tightly before placing it at the water's edge. I bowed my head, my voice low yet resolute, as I once again asked for forgiveness. Then, I stepped back and waited. The water stirred gently, ripples forming as the waves carried the knife deeper into the cave until it vanished beneath the surface. The cave fell silent, and a weight seemed to lift from my chest. I couldn't say for sure if the offerings had been accepted, but the beach felt at peace. Without looking back, I turned and made my way back to the resort, leaving the cave and its mysteries behind. Life at the resort soon returned to its usual rhythm. The beach reopened after 3 days, the water as calm and clear as ever. No further incidents occurred, and the spring breakers departed quietly once their leader was treated. I took care of their medical expenses myself. It wasn't entirely their fault, they hadn't known better. Still, I wish they had taken the rules seriously from the start. But regret changes nothing. The resort has always had its share of highs and lows, but after that ordeal, I started taking my responsibilities more seriously. I had always been diligent, Grandpa raised me to be, but now, I carried my role with a newfound sense of duty. It wasn't just about enforcing the rules anymore, I sought to understand why they mattered. This place has a delicate balance, one deeply ingrained in its history, and I realized it was my responsibility to preserve it. The rituals became more than just routine, they became meaningful. Each morning, I made my way to the tree behind my apartment, setting down the coffee and sugar, then carving small shapes into wood. Some mornings, I prayed. Other times, I simply sat in the quiet, letting the world settle around me. It wasn't necessarily about good luck or protection, though a part of me still believed in that. It was about the connection it gave me, to this land, to Grandpa, and to the duty he entrusted to me. There's a peculiar sense of pride in it. The resort belongs to me now, but I know it isn't mine alone. This land existed long before I did and will remain long after I'm gone. I'm merely a caretaker, a visitor passing through like everyone else. But while I'm here, I will honor it. I will respect it. Of course, life moves on. Each morning, the sugar disappears, and the coffee cup is empty. Guests come and go, some listen to the rules, while others dismiss them. I do what I can to warn them, to make them understand, but not everyone pays attention. And when someone ignores the rules, there are always consequences. Friends, be sure to write your impressions of the story in the comments. Who do you think the woman in the red cloak is? Who bit off the rule breaker's finger? And did the spirits calm down after Jake's donation? Like and subscribe to the channel. Our goal is 1,000 subscribers, so let's reach it together.